Our work is a big part of our lives. Are you loving what you do? And do you enjoy are you loving what you do? And do you love sorry, just gonna start over here. Our career and job is a big part of our lives. Do you love what you do? And are you doing what you love? If you are not, what do you want to do more of this year to get to where you want to be? Share with us in the comments to let us know, what is your career vision? What do you want more of? Hello and welcome to the Dare to Differentiate show. The purpose of the show is to help you own your voice, value, and visibility to advance your career. Whether you're tuning live or watching the replay, I am so delighted that you're here. Type in the comment to say hello and let us know where you are from. I'm your host, Diana YK Chan, recently named LinkedIn Top Voice and founder of My Markability, where I help you stand out, get higher, and earn more. So I'm super excited for today's episode on how to be the CEO of your career. This episode is for you if you want to proactively manage your career and your career destiny. So, who's in the house here? Let me say welcome. Hi, Jasmine. Hi, Sweeta. Great to see you here. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So what we're going to learn in today's show is I'm going to have my special guest, Anthony Ostler, here on. We're going to learn how to deliberately manage your career that aligns with your long-term vision. You're going to learn about the pros and cons of choosing a generalist versus specialist career path, what factors to consider when making a change in your career, how to identify growth opportunities to advance your career, and how to maximize your relationships with mentors, coaches, and sponsors, and how to embrace the future and stay ahead of change to future-proof your career. So that's what's on the agenda today. Are you excited? Type in the chat room to let me know. All right. So before I introduce Anthony to come on screen with us, a few housekeeping is that the replays will be available on my YouTube channel, where I'll be adding timestamps later on there. And I want to encourage you to click like and comment anytime. Share with us your thoughts, your key learnings, and questions. Engage with each other. If you have a question, feel free to ask us. And I really want to raise the vibrational energy here is to show your appreciation to our guest speaker. Share your kind words. Type in hashtag Go Anthony. He's already backstage there. Okay. Awesome. Great to see many of you here there. Welcome, welcome. Hey, Sony. Hey, Robbie. Thank you so much for being here. All right. So I met Anthony back in 2013 at an alumni event. And I remember when we had a conversation at this event, he really made a great impression on me. I don't remember exactly what we talked about, but I just remember that he made me feel that I was seen and heard, that I was the only person in the room. And I was so delighted to recently reconnect with Anthony again. So let me introduce you to Anthony. Anthony Ostler is the incoming president and CEO of the Canadian Bankers Association, effective of February 28, 2022. As the president and CEO, he will advance the perspectives of the banking sector to all levels of government, regulators, stakeholders, media, and the public. In this capacity, Anthony will play a strong role in the development of public policies on financial services that would contribute to a sound, successful, and banking system that benefits Canadians and Canada's economy. He will become a member of the board of directors of the International Banking Federation, a forum that addresses issues affecting banking around the world. Before joining the CBA, Anthony was a senior vice president, head of stakeholder engagement in global marketing at State Street Bank and Trust Company in Boston. Also at State Street, he held the roles of Senior Vice President, Client, Global Chief Operating Officer, and Senior Vice President, Head of Investor Relations. Anthony has a broad experience in senior positions in Canada at Manulife Asset Management, Manulife Financial. Anthony is an associate of the Institute of Canadian Bankers, a chartered financial analyst, a certified financial risk manager, and he earned his MBA with a distinction and the Ivy Scholar honor from the Ivy School of Business. He received the Ivy Distinguished Service Award for extraordinary service to the Ivy Business School, is the past chair of the board of the Ivy Alumni Network, which I'm part of as well, and a past member of the Ivy Advisory Board. Anthony served as a board member of Build on Boston and has taken up several leadership volunteer roles in support of social services organizations in British Columbia and Ontario. Are you guys excited to welcome Anthony on stage here? All right, let's type in hashtag Go Anthony.
Hi,
Hi,
Diana.
Anthony.
Thanks for that great greeting, and it's so great to see everyone logging in and making their comments. It's make for a really dynamic session today, so I really appreciate that participation, and just a great joy to be here. It's good to see you again. Obviously, we've talked a couple of times in advance of this, but it's just fantastic to be able to engage and support you. And it's neat to think in the last 9 years how far you've come in running in your business and stuff. So I'm thankful that we did meet back in 2013.
Yeah, I'm so thankful as well. And time has just flown by. I can't believe it's already been 9 years now.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so we're going to kick things off with just some rapid fire questions, and then we're going to get to know a little bit more about your journey and hear your best advice on managing your career. So I'm going to kick things off on like what fulfills you and what are your core values?
Great questions. From a fulfillment perspective, I'm one of the things I'm really interested in people and helping people advance and do well in their careers, and that comes from partly my father did the same thing, and unfortunately he died many years ago, over 25 years ago, and so in some ways he motivates me, and part of his legacy is to be helping others, and there's part of it that generally likes people, but I'm also motivated to think about like your legacy isn't what's in your bank account or your job title. It's how you impact others, and because you live on through others. And so my job, I see myself and feel myself as having my dad live on through me, and then try and help others and doing the same thing. And so if I engage with people and help them, that's a way of my dad living on and me living on, because it's not my title or my bank account. It's who I impact and how I help people. And so that drives into a number of different values and stuff, but obviously a key part of that is a service orientation, a high level of integrity. I think you would know, and others that getting to know me, I'm a fairly transparent individual. My kids always laugh. I talked about adaptability. I've always pushing myself to do different things, and so I view myself as adaptable, and then also very collaborative. In connection with other people, I'm always interested in what other people's perspectives are, because what you and I both learned at Ivy is that the group generally gets a better solution than the individual. And so I like that sort of collaboration element and such. So those are a few of the sort of things that fulfill and drive me and are reflection of my values. So hopefully that's gives you an understanding of how I operate. So
I love that. And I feel like this is what really connected me to you as well, that we share this common values of having that service-oriented mindset and like leaving our legacy. I used to have on my wall, leave your legacy. That's on my wall. So I really resonate what you talked about here. So I want to congratulate you on your new role, and really want to hear a little bit in terms of how you landed your current role and what were your biggest lessons learned. I know a lot of our viewers are in this career transition phase, are looking to join something new, and want to hear a little bit about how you went about landing your current new role.
very well. I'm currently based in Boston, live in a lovely town called Wellesley, Massachusetts. If everyone's ever got to move to Boston, Wellesley is a place you got to look at. It's amazing. But I've been down here for 7.5 years, and moved my kids down, and my wife obviously, and I'd promised my younger child that she would be able to graduate from high school from here, which is happening this June. And so my objective was to not move her in that interim. And last year in 2021, we as a family confirmed, well, hey, graduation's coming up. What are our objectives? Where do we want to be? And we agreed collectively as a family that we wanted to be in Canada. And so when we came to that conclusion, I tapped my network and let people know. So I probably talked to over 100 people over a fairly concentrated period of time, but reaching out to them and either asking for introductions and letting them know and that kind of stuff. And quite interestingly, someone that I mentored back when I was the chief marketing officer at Magnus Asset Management, she ended up introducing me to somebody who put my name forward to the search firm that was doing this role for the Canadian Bankers Association, and so that endorsement, so a long-time contact, that endorsement was what would unlock the opportunity. And then, I'm not sure if many people here have been through an executive search process, but it's really thorough. It's quite an interesting process. Yeah. And there's different ways to go about it, but there's often periods of quiet because they're looking at other candidates and they got process. They got to meet with executives, like herding cats to get the selection committees together, that kind of stuff. And so there's different things you can do in that time period. I did two things. One, I kept on looking at other opportunities to make sure that I was evaluating things appropriately and making sure this is what I really wanted. And then the other thing was I did a lot of legwork on preparing for interviews and triangulating. So I tapped my network of people. What do you know about the organization, or what do you did this parallel organization, or what's going on in Canada, and so by doing that, I was continually engaging. And so there were probably, by the time I finished the process, there were probably 45 people in my network that I talked to about the role as part of my triangulation and advancement and homework, as going through that specific search process. And then I also invested a significant amount of time in preparing for it. Like I had a significant interview with the chair of the board. I did 40 hours of work in advance of that, and prepared a whole deck, like
Wow.
a 30-page deck of my observations and thoughts and how I would go about processes, so that when I went into the interview, it was like I was going to a board meeting, not an interview. Like, here, we're doing the work. If I'm going to be your CEO, I've got to be prepared for my meeting with you.
Yeah. I love this story. I'm going to summarize some key learnings. If the audience want to type in here, is what I'm hearing is, one is really clarity on where you want to go. Right? That's number one, is get the first step is clarity. And second is really tapping into the network. In your case, you talked to over 100 people, and really, planting the seeds that you want to move back to Canada there. The third piece is really, I'm hearing, is the preparation for success, right? Even though you have this referral, but you have to prepare yourself so that you are increasing your chances of success there. I love that.
Yeah, and I think one other takeaway on that preparation is, by not sort of keeping busy, but by doing that work, you're less emotional. You're not going the ups and downs going, well, I haven't talked to anyone in 2 weeks. We're like, am I dead? You're not dead. There's a process, right? Yeah. So what do you do with the gaps? And part of that is using that time to actually prepare and make the next step more successful.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. All right. So we're going to dive and talk about career, and we'll be answering some questions later on. I know some audience has some questions out there, but we'll be taking that a little later there. So want to talk a little bit about your career highlights. What has helped you get to where you are today? What are the key experience or skills that you gained? And I know that we have a slide here that we want to share with the audience so that you can talk about it nicely here, about your career highlights here.
Sure. I know this may seem weird. It's a three-dimensional cube, but my career has been not your average career. I'm not staying in this single swim lane, but it's actually been on purpose. I started as a part-time bank teller back in 1992 at Royal Bank of Canada, and at that point realized, okay, I've joined a quality firm. They're training and they're investing in me, but knew I wanted to do more. I went back to do my MBA to add my skills, and then went to strategy consulting to start looking at learning how to look at the industry from a strategic perspective, and then rejoined Royal Bank and worked my way through all these different roles that I've done since then. But what was key is I had a really interesting opportunity in the mid 2000s. I took a firm called Canaccord Public, as head of investor relations, and then I was able to run the risk management function. And when I was in that process, I got to meet with the board every quarter, and we would have board dinners either the night before or after, and that kind of stuff. And so I got to know the board members really well in the 6.5 years there. I went to every board meeting. It was an amazing experience to be able to be involved in the governance elements and help run and build up that company into a public company. And one of the things I took away from it was I wanted to be a board member one day. So we're talking now 15, 16 years ago. Okay, so what can I do if I want to be a board member? If I think of the skills matrix that we need at Canaccord to get someone on a board, what are the things we're looking for? Well, people need to have worked different functional areas, need to have lived in different countries, or at least different regions, and they may be helpful if they've worked in different sectors. And so I purposely set about building my skills matrix. And so what you see here is a reflection of all the different things that I've been pushing myself to do and get out of that swim lane, so that when I emerge in my 60s and want to do board work, I will be in a position to be able to do board work. And so part of those discussions was 100 phone calls and discussions and video calls and stuff that I did as part of my process. One of the things I said to people is, I'm looking for a capstone role. The last thing I need is a leadership role that ties together all the different things that I've done. And so, the great thing about coming up this coming Monday is, I've got a key cornerstone or capstone in my strategy that I'm working on. And, it'll keep me busy for the next 7 to 10 years. And then when I retire, the focus will be on obviously doing the board work and putting myself forward as a very capable person with the skills to do that work. So it's been a long-term vision, and that's what reflects this work that I've been doing here.
Wow, I love that. Having this long-term vision of where you want to go so that you can really strategically and deliberately manage your career. Was there a defining moment for you in your career that really changed the trajectory of your career?
Yeah, actually, I mean, there's been a number, but when I stood up my first day of MBA class at Ivy, they asked us what you wanted to do. And I said, I'll be a chief financial officer. Because at that point, chief CFOs were not just financial, but they were also strategic. Not that CFOs today aren't strategic, but there were a lot of MBA CFOs is what I mean by that. Post our graduation, Enron occurred, which was an MBA CFO, and people realized, okay, well, maybe we need to make sure controls and stuff are put first. And so there was a big emphasis on CPAs, and CPAs can be very strategic. I'm not saying they're not, but if you don't have a CPA, the chances of being a CFO are significantly diminished. And that's something that I realized around the same time I started to set my long-term goals about wanting to do board work in my 60s. And so I then had to reassess, well, what do I want to do? Because I was thinking CFO. I thought, well, why don't I broaden out a bit and more specifically work on that longer term trajectory, and then out of that should come something that will be valuable, which is what's actually obviously happened. But I abandoned that CFO route, which I'd been pursuing for, at that point, about 10 years. So it was a bit of a change in course, but a lot of people don't have longer term goals anyway like that, I'm sure. But for me, it was an important lesson.
Yeah, that's amazing. So looking back, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Probably my number one thing for younger self is life is absolutely not relative. And so that can happen in a lot of different ways. It's not about the size of your house or the speed of your car or your job title or your bank account. It really, what matters is, what are you doing that is important to you? And your family is important. Your family is super important. Your friends are important. Your career is obviously important, but there's a balance there. If you get too out of whack, or you get too absorbed in things, or you're too worried about what others think, that can impact how you operate and do things. And so when I was younger in my career, often I would try and brag about my accomplishments or push people, not push people, so be aggressive in sort of trying to get the point in meetings and stuff, where I didn't need to do that necessarily. When I realized, no, this is about working together with people. I'm not trying to score points, and it's not relative. I'm not trying to get ahead of that person. What I'm trying to do is develop my own skills and contribute in a valued way. That changed my approach, and I think I was able to be more natural and less about the relative.
I love that advice there, especially the question, and I ask this a lot, are you doing what matters to you?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, we all have that, like, what's your definition of your success or happiness, and what's really truly important to you. So I love that. Feel free to type in that there, and I see more audience are joining in as well on LinkedIn here. What are some of the guiding principles managing, advancing your career? If you were to give someone advice here with today's topic of being the CEO of your career, what are some guiding principles in managing and advancing your career?
A couple of things that I think about, or they're important to think about, are, one is it's a marathon, not a sprint. And that kind of fits with that relative and absolute thing too, because sometimes you may see a friend get promoted, or maybe you all graduate the same year and someone's doing this or that, but what you don't know is what they've sacrificed to get there, or the inside track they may have or whatever. And so more importantly is to think about what's important to you. I think it's also important to spend time, we'll talk about this later in our discussion, but spend time on with what's important to you, those criteria, and make sure that you're positioning yourself so you can be opportunistic, but that you're not reactive. So there should be a broader objective. I know sometimes it's hard to know specifically what you want to do. Like, not everyone wants to grow up to be a CEO one day. And I'm not saying about a title. It's more about what are the types of things you'd want to do? Do you want to work with people? Do you want to be diving into spreadsheets? Do you want to be out on the road talking to clients? Do you want to be designing products? Like, what are the things that holistically are the things that you think you'd be interested in doing, and have that help drive what you're trying to do versus, oh, I want to be, XYZ title. And
Yeah.
that will then, fit in. I'm not sure what you've seen with your clients or that kind of stuff as you're advising them. But like, I think some of those things are really important.
I feel it's interesting. I feel like a lot of people come to me a lot of times. There's this chasing that title or chasing that next level of promotion in defining success, especially if one has been, let's say, at the manager level for quite some time. They want to get to that next level to feel that they are successful. But really what I'm seeing, what's really important going back to your core values, right? Of what's truly important to you, like what's really going to truly make you happy and feel fulfilled, and that you feel like you are doing what you're meant to do there. And that's hard to do because there's the analytical mind or logical mind. I think that I need to get to the next promotion in order to be successful.
Yeah, no, it's good. That's important. And I think the other thing that would be important to think about principle wise is you're not on your own. So thinking about like, how can you involve others? Like a core thing to think about is do you have a mentor? If not, how do you find a mentor? How do you manage that mentoring relationship? Again, we'll talk a bit about this.
Yeah.
But I think that you're not on your own. There's a lot of different ways you can engage. Even if you don't have a mentor, maybe you have a partner or spouse that can help you, or parents. Like, there's people that know and love you really well. Sometimes they can frustrate you, but they can actually be really good advice spots. So you're not on your own. So like, it's important to bring people along, because then they can give you that sober second thought and the advice and be a support for you as you're trying to achieve your objectives.
Yeah. So moving on, I know you've been very actively involved in giving back, volunteer work. How has your extracurricular activities helped you grow and help others?
So there's a number of different dimensions to that. Number one has been a huge intrinsic benefit of just being able to kind of, as talked about at the top of my from a legacy perspective, by helping and doing things for others, by making the world better, be it your local community or a sports organization, all the way to global things that you can get involved in. All those things, bring meaning to life beyond your job title or your bank account, right? And so I think that that's something that there's a huge benefit to doing it. And so when people do extracurricular, it's important to have it match with your values or your interests, not just to do it for your resume.
Mm-mm.
And so if it matches with something that really motivates you, I think that makes a big difference, and can really help you advance and grow, because then what will happen is it becomes a virtuous cycle. You do something, it works, and you enjoy it, and then you do more and you gain traction. So I think that's an important driver. From the point of view of growth and evolution around extracurricular, if you think about it from sometimes you're an individual contributor role, or you're running just a small team, Well, if you're doing volunteer work, maybe you lead the board or a committee, or you raise money with an event or something, but you're doing things that are different than what you would do at work, and that adds to your skill set. And then beyond you getting the intrinsic benefit of advancing things, you're also learning how to deal with different situations. So I've chaired a number of boards and overseen large budgets and purchase of buildings. I raised $1.3 million for family services in Greater Vancouver. There's a lot of different things that you can achieve. I had no idea I could raise that much money. I thought I'd be lucky if I'd raised 5,000, right? Like, you will achieve and do things through volunteer work that you may never have thought you could do. And so often you're only limited by your potential, but if you have passion and you break the blinders apart and you put something into something, you can achieve far more than you've ever thought you could. And so that then can create confidence and self-esteem that can help you with your work and elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. So Kate mentioned, I'm a big fan, Anthony. He's always willing to help others with career goals. That's
thanks, Kate. Yeah, it's nice to see you.
Great to hear from Kate. And I can't agree more. I was thinking back in my early career as well. I've always loved to give back. And I remember when I was working at TELUS, I was actively involved with campus recruitment. And I also created a case workshop teaching people how to prepare for case interviews given my IB training. And that little workshop became something much bigger where I was training
Right.
hundreds of also team managers in the call center of how to prepare for a case study and also help build their analytical skills. That opportunity of just volunteering doing that led to actually a new role created for me, like being a training development program manager and creating all the training development for the department there for like over 300 people. So I love what you share. You just never know of what a
Right.
volunteer opportunity could manifest
And
into.
what it unlocks for you, right? And you can learn so much. Also, like trying to manage volunteers is like herding cats, right? So you also learn, like if you get into a leadership role in a volunteer capacity, you learn skills that are sort of like the equivalent of impact and influence at a company. If you're in a company and you got to do a project with people in other departments, they don't report to you. They're kind of like volunteers,
Yeah.
right? They don't have to do stuff for you. They got other things going on. So learning, like you can learn stuff from volunteer work that can help you directly in your day work. So there's multiple benefits and beyond what you can do from the intrinsic benefit of doing it. So
Yeah, that's great to hear. I'm curious to hear from the audience what type of volunteer work that you do that has really helped you build your confidence and skills and even getting new opportunities. Feel free to share that with us there. So moving on, Anthony, what does it mean to really be the CEO of your career? What does that really mean?
well, it's a great question. I think that a key part of it is taking ownership for it, and a CEO has multiple dimensions to their role, right? Part of it is strategy, part of it is external, like engaging with people, part of it is internal, making sure operations and staffing are working, part of it's governance, making sure that they do things with integrity. So there's always different sort of things that you think about. Okay, that's what a CEO's roles involve. Well, how do you do that to your career? How do you do that as a self? If you think about yourself as someone that people are going to want to work with and hire and maybe work for, what are the things that you need to do that? And so you need to be strategic and deliberate. You need to be purposeful. You need to be continually doing that engagement so people know who you are and support you and that kind of stuff. You need to be working internally, like, so what are the skills and experiences that I need to be able to get what I want to achieve? And so am I going to go to night school, do an MBA? Am I going to do a CFA? Whatever, whatever, see the different industries, but like, are there things that I can get? Maybe do a PMP to do your project management. There's different things that you could do that would add to your skill sets and also with your experience that will then help you progress together. But it's holistic and it requires ownership in a long view and then execution.
Yeah, that's great advice there. So just tying into this is how can one really deliberately manage a career that aligns with their long-term vision? And I also want to put out there the flip side is what if someone doesn't have a long-term vision? How do they go about
Sure.
managing that?
So, deliberating and managing with a long-term vision we'll do that, and then there's shorter-term elements. But there's a phrase called reverse engineer. If you work backwards from where you want to go, like Diana, you reverse engineer one of your objectives in the summer. You have different holidays that are going to bookend the summer and what your boys are going to do. Like that's good vision and planning, right? Especially after a couple of years in the pandemic.
Yeah.
But if you think about the same thing for your career, so if you think about what I've been doing for the skills matrix, I want to eventually do board work. I reverse engineer. I looked at the skills matrix and what are things I need to do. And so as opportunities presenting themselves, okay, well, that's an opportunity to work in a different country. I'm going to do that. Or that's an opportunity to oversee people locally. Or that's an opportunity to switch to a different function. Or that's an opportunity to switch to a different pillar of the industry. I've been purposely doing that, but looking at that end goal of how do I build into that? So if you have a long-term vision, that's how you do that. If you don't have a long-term vision, there's a couple of different things. One is really understanding what's important to you from the point of view of, like, for instance, culture. Like, I think most people today, especially in the pandemic, culture is super important. I want to work with people I like, right? That's why, like, Dan, I love you. So one of the reasons I want to do this is I want to be working with you, right? So like, this is fun to be doing, right? So I want to do stuff where people I share values and passion with, right? So culture is important. What else is important? And those things can then at least help you filter what opportunities you're seeing or what to focus on. Additionally, if you don't have a short-term plan, a long-term plan, start developing one. It doesn't mean you need to have the answer, but start doing the process. Find a mentor, start working with people. Get it someone like Diana, who's an executive coach, to help you with that, right? She has a lot of experience in this. I've been working with an executive coach, a fantastic man, for a dozen years now, and we meet
Wow.
every 2 weeks. We've met every 2 weeks for 12 years.
Every 2 weeks for 12 years.
And the
Wow.
reason I've done that is, there's not multiple reasons, but who else, like if you're Wayne Gretzky or Tom Brady, do you not have coaches? Do we not need coaches to be successful in our careers? I mean, I don't know. I'm not perfect. There's a lot of things that I need guidance and help on, and my coach knows when I'm getting in the wrong direction or whatever, and he can sense things, and he triangulates, and he works hard, and he's helped me work. My career has not been like this. There's been lots of ups and downs and setbacks, and he's helped me keep steady and narrow. But that's part of what helping achieve the long-term vision and developing it. So there's different things that you can do if you don't have one to help figure that out and help you become more effective.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you share that you've had a coach for 12 years and meeting every 2 weeks. Like, that's the commitment and consistency to your personal growth, development, and to where you really want to be. So I love that. And I'm curious to hear from the audience, and if you have invested in your growth or a coach to help you get to where you want to be there. So let's talk the next question here. And I want to show this graph as well. It's like, what are the pros and cons of choosing a generalist versus a specialist career path? I feel like this is a common question I get, and I want to hear your take from a career advancement standpoint. And I'm going to show this graph that you have here.
Yeah, so it's a little hard to see, but that little black thing is a stovepipe, and then we have obviously the Swiss Army knife, the generalist. The stovepipe respecting the specialist. It's very common and easy, especially in today's world, to be put in specialist roles. So like often your first role out of college, college, you can see the American part of me coming out, even though I'm Canadian, but you come out of university and you go into a job and you're not managing anyone, you're an individual contributor. And the risk is that you can stay in that role. And that may not be by design. It could be that's what you want to do. If that's what you want to do, that's fantastic. But one of the things you have to think about is, like, how do you grow and evolve? And so the advantage of being a specialist, let's say you're a tax lawyer or a tax accountant, is taxes are never going away. They're super complex, and they're getting nothing but more complex. And so you could be doing tax and be a tax specialist for the rest of your career, and that would be quite lucrative, and it's not going away. Some of the disadvantages of that is you could be working for someone that's been working for 30 years and doesn't plan to retire until they do 40 years. And so how do you get promoted? You could be qualified but blocked, right? So there's some of the challenges of that specialization. That's one of them. Another one could be the fact that there could be a regulatory change. Someone somehow abolishes taxes. Imagine that. Then all of a sudden there's no need for your job, and you've been working for 20 years in one thing and you can't do anything else. So that's the risk. If you're going to be a specialist, you have to think about, well, am I dependent on something? Like if you're a specialist on one type of software, maybe you need to expand, whatever it is. Like it could be different things that you could do. From a generalist perspective, I would consider myself obviously a generalist, but a generalist would be someone that obviously is doing different things through time that don't fit necessarily in one swim lane. And with that tends to be more of a skills-based approach to work necessarily versus experience. Not that specialists don't have skills, they have to have a lot of skills to do their work, but it's part of what a specialist's value has been, the length and time of experience in the seat or in that swim lane. Whereas a generalist, their experiences aren't going to be directly applicable often to the roles they're taking. And so the disadvantage for a generalist is they could be too surfacey or don't have enough depth. They could be overlooked for certain roles, because often even quite senior roles in organizations still require 15 or 20 years of experience in a relative swim lane. And so it depends on what you're trying to do and what you want to achieve. If you want to be a manager of those specialists, you're going to need to be a generalist. If you're happy being the head tax accountant, at a firm one day, and you're willing to take the time to work your way through and have the patience for whenever your boss's boss retires and that kind of stuff, those are different things. But one of the things that I think is important in today's world is, even if you're comfortable being a specialist, I highly recommend that you spend time and effort developing skills and experience to be able to diversify your skill set, so that if the world changes, you're able to adapt. Because a
Yeah.
firm could be acquired, there could be a regulatory change, there could be a major change in the economy, and if a lot of what the value you bring is just on the experience side and not on the skill side, it's not as going to be as transferable. So I think that's really important to think about.
I like that thinking. That's something I've been talking about. Diversify, but also specialize. That you still want to broaden your skills from a marketability standpoint. I think what we're really talking about from a marketability standpoint of how the world is changing, or how more new jobs are being created as well that never existed before. How can we continue to diversify to increase our marketability?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's great. I'm curious to hear from the audience, like what's resonating with you? Because I know there's a lot to think about. Like, are you thinking of going down a specialist path or a generalist path? Want to hear from you. From your experience, if someone wants to get from, say, the manager level to a director and to VP, do you feel that there is a certain path that is more advantageous? Is it really developing more that leadership skills and the broad that communication skills, and having that broader knowledge what will give them an advantage?
I think the more senior you get, the more skills it becomes. The skills aren't obviously, there's a combination of experience requirement, but the skills become really important to your leadership skills, your problem solving skills, your ability to think strategically or cut across silos. There's a number of different dimensions that become important the more senior you become. There's also executive presence, and so there's different dimensionalities around that, and some of those things are hard to define, but those become important when you're trying to think about trying to crack to the more senior levels.
Mm-hmm.
One way to
Yeah.
do that is to try and kind of be a generalist in a specialist area. So
Mm.
maybe tax is part of a broader part of finance, and maybe what you do is you spend time in tax, and then you go into financial planning and evaluation, and then maybe you go into the budget area. Then and so all of a sudden what you've done is you've leveraged your financial knowledge and skills, and you've worked in different areas within the finance function, and now you're considered potentially for a CFO role, versus just being narrowly done a tax and being stuck because the head tax accountant's not going anywhere or something, right? So there's different ways to be able to crack more senior roles or opportunities. Maybe if you haven't been a CFO before, maybe because you've rotated those different functions, you could become CFO of a business unit, and then you learn all the different sort of the cross elements around that. If you're trying
Mm-hmm.
to, if you're maybe you've spent 10 years in tax accounting and you want to try something different, how do you get across? Well, put your hand up to do projects or different things to cut across and get experience. I'm not sure what you've seen with your clients, but it'd be interesting to get your perspective.
Yeah. So what I'm seeing right now with more senior level roles, we're talking director level and above, is I have seen also what I call like newly created roles, where they are valuing people's different skill sets that make a new role. So for example, I had a client last year who worked at the hospital for over 10 years in the ICU in an operations type of role, and she
Wow.
pivoted to long-term care. And it was a brand new role that they developed that was operations plus strategic partnerships, because it
Right.
required them to also work with the hospitals. Because of her background in the hospital, she was also
Right.
able to work externally while being operations. So I'm seeing these kind of newly created roles, and I feel that if you can connect the dots of looking at your skill set and experience of how understanding what the need is in the market, it could be really give you a competitive edge.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've done 7 roles in my career that didn't exist prior to my doing them, and
Mm.
often I did them. Like I've done investor relations 4 times. Each time I did investor relations, I went into an area I'd never been before. So I mean, obviously the first time in investor relations I hadn't done before, that was the Royal Bank of Canada, but I went from investor relations to corporate treasury. At Canaccord, obviously did investor relations when I took the public. Then I went to run risk management. At Manulife, I did investor relations. Then I became the chief marketing officer at Manulife Asset Management. At State Street, I was in investor relations, and then I went to be the chief operating officer, looking after one of their largest clients. And and also had other roles as well. But those are just examples of one doing brand new roles. But why did those happen? Like
Yeah.
why the leadership teams were willing to have me go and do things I'd never done before. Sorry, the COO role had existed, so that's a bad example. But that's a different thing I was getting at. But sorry, the other roles had not existed. The CMO role had not existed. The treasury role had not existed. The risk management role had not existed. So those are 3 examples of the 7 that I've done. But the key thing there was managers were willing to trust me because of my skills and experience and my integrity, how hard I work, my ability to collaborate, connect with others, and they're willing to let me do those things. And I think it's important, right? Because that's why she got that opportunity. It's the same thing. Like and if you then get known for that, and you're willing to take the risks, and people are willing to take the risks on you, it becomes a virtuous cycle. And so part of that is just getting comfortable, getting out of your swim lane, and going, okay, well, what do I bring to the table that would work? And so she obviously did that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think what Sharon just said here, it is adaptability is key, especially now. It's such a key skill to have, and it is so important. Anthony's leading from the front here.
Thanks, Sharon.
Yeah, so adaptability is key. And I read somewhere also, there was a report from LinkedIn that adaptability is one of the core skills that hiring managers look for these days, given all the changes that are happening. Is one of the core things that they really look for. So part of showing your track record of success, but also this growth mindset that you're willing to embrace change and be flexible and adaptable.
The other thing is relationships are really important. I've known Sharon since 1986. I went on a rugby tour to New Zealand and Australia, and her family hosted me. We kept in touch all these years later. We used to write letters back in the day when there was no email. And Sharon has continued to push herself and add to her skill set and education, and has taken a lot of risks. She lives in Scotland, but she's also lived in England and is from New Zealand. So it's neat to see friends continue to be successful, and I appreciate her kind words.
Oh, amazing. So moving on is how to identify growth opportunities to advance your career. And I know you have another slide here we want to talk about is how to really identify that. I'll let you walk this through.
So this chart, I think it's really important to think about. There's different things about. If you think about landscape of desired role or roles, the rectangle that's here is the job description of a job you're aiming for. The reality is very few candidates have everything that's required for a role. And I think that the reality, that's okay. You don't want to be the unicorn. If you're the unicorn, you're overqualified for the role. Never take a job you're 100% qualified for. But just think about, like, it's really important to have stretch yourself when you take a role and to have growth. And if you have an employer that's not willing to hire you, if you don't tick every single box, then you don't want to work for them, right? So if they want a unicorn, no one's a unicorn. So don't take a unicorn role. What's more important is to think about how do you grow and evolve and those sort of things. And you think about the landscape of the role, how you as a candidate present yourself, you need to cover as much as possible, but still have room for growth. And so the outer white circle that's there reflects all your strengths that you have associated with covering the role. The white part of the circle are the strengths that you have that you haven't demonstrated either recently or at your current employer. Often, if it's say you're looking for a job internally, often your current employer will look at you based on what you're most recently doing or what you've done at the company. They may not value as much what you've done elsewhere. But what they're doing is recency bias. They're doing, the cognitive biases. They're looking at you as what you're currently doing. So that's your displayed strengths. But you may be doing other things or have the things like you maybe did an MBA and you know things about marketing, but you're not currently using it in your current role, or maybe you've got leadership experience and you're currently an individual contributor role. And those are some of your other strengths. And so a key thing is to try and display those. So do you tell your employers about your volunteer work? Do you remind people you have an MBA, or do you get involved in a project that maybe works with the marketing department, so then you can then demonstrate that you understand marketing and that you want to grow and evolve in that area? But you do these things to increase what you're displaying. And then ultimately what you're doing is covering more of the landscape. And similarly, you may have a role you want, but maybe you have too big a gaps. So what can you do to cover that? So maybe you have to go back to school and get an MBA or do accreditation of some sort, or maybe it's take a lateral to get experience in a different area so that you then have a stronger base to be considered in roles, because the careers don't go upwards. like this, you have to often take laterals. I've taken a lot of laterals in my career, but I've been doing purposely to try and build that long-term, fill that skills matrix for a board member. So I've been fine with that, knowing that at some point it would break through. And so you have to have faith that, what you're tracking is covering and filling the gaps through time. And so you fill more of that rectangle. And then once you've done that, you expand further and then continue to think about what you're doing. It becomes a virtuous cycle.
Yeah, I love that. So what I'm hearing here is with the innate strengths that you have, it may not be visible to others yet, but you really need to toot your own horn to let others know that you have these strengths so that you are more marketable and more attractive to another role there. Is that what I'm understanding there?
Yeah, and tutoring, it also involves action. So doing
Yes.
projects or stepping up, or it's not just telling people what you've done, it's also demonstrating.
Demonstrating the proof.
Demonstrating, displaying, right? So
Yeah.
it's not just promotion. So
Yes, I love that. I always say that when you claim yourself that you have a strength, you also want to give proof, the evidence, the support to back it up there. That's really, really important. So I'm glad you're showing this graph because it helps people to see the vision. Okay, well, what are those opportunities there that I could showcase more and demonstrate more that will make me more marketable there. I remember when I made the transition actually to was it the transition I would say to recruiting from when I had like a marketing operations background. It was something very different. And one thing I had to talk more about was my extracurricular of how I was always involved with campus recruitment. And that really helped with also demonstrate those innate strengths as well. Like those are things that I'm really passionate about. And I actually did to move into a recruitment type role there. Yeah. Good. This is good. So someone said that but they always look for the unicorn, and I feel like that's my experience as a recruiter as well. When recruited, that the hiring manager always wants the unicorn candidate. So I love hearing that you recognize that that there's no such thing as a unicorn candidate. What's your take on that? Like when you hear people say, "I want that unicorn candidate," or "We want someone perfect," like what's your take on that or feedback on that?
Well, as a leader, I want the best candidate possible for the role, but I want someone that can grow. If I hire a unicorn, what's their potential growth? Like if someone's willing to, if they're the unicorn and willing to take the role, they probably don't want to grow. I want someone that wants to grow, right? So, and so you want it, like we're all in this because I'm assuming everyone on this call wants to grow. If they're interested in their career, they want to grow and evolve, right? So you want to grow and evolve. You want room for growth in a role. You don't want to come in a role fully being able to do it. You want to come in below it so that you can gain traction and grow and then get past it. What happens for me as a leader, if I have someone that's slightly below but that can grow into it, is they'll then bring a fresh perspective and they'll change things, and likely for the better, because as they grow and evolve and look at things and deal with the challenges of growth, they'll then look at things like, hey, that's an issue. We need to change that process or put this control in, or we need to redesign how we're doing this, or we need to change how we deal with clients, or whatever it is, because they have that fresh perspective. And then they grow and then 2 to 3 years later, they're ready to do something different. But I've had them through that growth curve and the momentum that comes out of that. And then, I'd rather love someone than lose them than not at all, right? So it's that fit and that desire for growth, assuming that they have a lot of the core elements I need and they have that desire for growth. That's what I want. I want people that are willing to take risks, to take on new things, that want to grow. And then they're part of my team for a while, and then they go on. I'm not going to covet someone. I want to celebrate people. I want them to be successful. So, I hopefully can help them grow and evolve and unlock that and go on to do great things. And so it's really important to be thinking differently about that. Flip side, if you're trying to apply for a role and you're hitting the wall against, well, you're not the unicorn, there's a couple of different things. You need to think about your approach. A large amount of names that actually get through the stacks and the reviews come from internal referrals. So if there's an organization you want to work for and you don't know anyone there, work your butt off to get to know people there.
Yeah.
And then when a role comes up and you've been talking to people for 6 months and you've got a network, and then they can put in a good word for you. But you can't be opportunistic. Oh, there's a job at Google. I want to work at Google, and then go for it. You need to be thinking about, okay, I want to work at Google. I know it's going to take me 6 months or a year to get a job there, but what am I going to do in the next little while to actually drive and meet people at Google, so that when if an opportunity comes up, they're going to want to work with me, and they'll put my name in when I apply for the role.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Someone said the fresh perspective is very valuable if utilized and supported. So we have a question from Sharon here is how would you instill on someone who may not have the confidence to stand on a box and shout out about their skills or strengths? So I guess promoting themselves when they may have lacked the confidence.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I think that there's a couple things. It's really important as a leader not just to listen to the loudest voice, right? Like it's important to be substance based, to be data driven, to look at candidates and individuals if you're selecting them for opportunities, to look at what they bring to the table. And so that's like I've referenced this a number of times, but a skills matrix. Like when I'm looking at candidates, I look at the skills matrix and I think about holistically how they hit the landscape of what I'm looking for, but also what their growth trajectory is and what I'm looking for in that kind of person, and then also the cultural fit. And so, what's important is if you don't know how to necessarily get comfortable and stand on a box and show about the strengths, what would be important is to think about ways to get access to people and develop a relationship so they get to know you. And it's not about, hey, look at me. It's about, oh, okay. And then by getting to know you, they then understand your skills and strengths and your interests. And there's a couple of different ways to do that. But like if there's another department or another company that you're interested in, reach out to those people and say, hey, I'd like to talk to you about your job and what you're doing, what are your plans, and that kind of stuff. And just create a dialogue. So you're not applying for a job. You want to know about their job or about their company or their strategy. And then through time, they're going to get to know you, and by asking questions and that kind of stuff, all of a sudden they go, okay, this person's interested in my area, or they're interested in my company. And I've, through talking to them, learned that they know this, and that, because they're asking good questions, or they displayed skills or background that would only come from their background and interest. And so I think that's a way to get out there. Now, if you're not able or interested in networking and connecting with people, it's going to be a lot harder to be successful. And so you have to learn to overcome that. I think sometimes people think networking is a shotgun thing, like you go into a conference and you're handing out business cards. It's not about handing out business cards. Obviously, you want to give your business cards to people when you meet them, but only when you really connect with them. It's more about connecting them. So Diana described when we first met, she felt that she was the only person in the room. It's really important to, if you're going to want to go meet people, to maybe go and meet 2 or 3 people and really get to know them. What's their background and that kind of stuff. Like Diana has a really inspiring background of being an immigrant to Canada and overcoming a lot of different elements and putting that dynamic energy into so much and paying it forward in multiple dimensions. And I could feel that when I met her. I didn't know her background, but I was like, this is what I want to get to know. And I could tell the energy that you brought to things. It was like, wow, I want to get to know this person. But if I had been shotgunning, I wouldn't have gotten that feeling, right? And so I think it's really important to engage with people and create quality relationships. And through time, you ask people, hey, is there someone else you could introduce me to, or whatever, that kind of stuff, and do it from there. And that's not networking. That's just getting to know people. But by getting to know people, they get to know you, and then they can celebrate you and help you advance.
Yeah, I love that. One of my ABC rule, and I talk about networking, is always be connecting, always be curious, and always be cultivating. Those are my ABCs. And I thought I want to add on about this confidence piece, because that's something the work that I do a lot with my clients is actually building confidence. And one thing I've been talking a lot about is to build that confidence, you need to really first identify your value, to really understand what your value is. If you're not sure with that, get that feedback, send out a survey to others. And then the other piece is really believing in your value, which is really the mindset piece. A big part is like what are those things that you're telling yourself? Are you seeing yourself as a top candidate or not? And then a third piece I talk about is conveying your value. So this is really communicating your value so that you can practice that and saying that where you build that confidence. So that's a form that I've been teaching a lot to my clients to really believe in themselves more so that they can really articulate their value and worth there.
Yeah, that's great. Awesome. That's great, Dan. It's important. Just, have faith, right? You're not an imposter.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
You're here for a reason.
So I want to move on now is to talk about what are the factors to consider when making a change in your career. And I know we have some questions here. that you've come up, and this is good. I want to encourage you all to take notes or take a screenshot of this. These are some like really good questions to consider when you're thinking about making a change.
Yeah, so we've talked a little bit about some of these things. These things have come up in what we discussed already, but like, especially in the pandemic, I think a lot of people are frustrated or going, okay, well, I'm not sure what happy what I'm doing or that kind of stuff. It's really important before you quit your job or whatever that you actually understand what's important or where you want to go, and because there could be ways around, maybe it's the current department you're in or that kind of stuff, or there could be ways around solving that. And so it's important to ask yourself, so like, what's important in a role and the criteria elements. It's really important to understand what's important, like culture, those different things, who you're working for, values, alignments, what does your organization have to do, what's it trying to achieve, what's its purpose. Those things are important to understand. So spend time on your criteria. How long have you been in your role? You got to be, your career is a marathon, not a sprint. We're working for 35, 40 years, right? So it's not going to be, you're not going to achieve it all in your first 5 or 10 years. And you may feel at your 25th year that maybe you've hit a wall, but like, it's not done yet. You still have 50 more years in your career. So you have to think holistically, how long have I been in the role? What am I, if I'm in the role, what am I considered proficient? What is the chances of getting, if I've been in the role for a while, is there a chance that I could get promoted? Is there something in the pipeline? Is the organization good at promoting people that have been in a role for a while? And, then the final question we talked about is about the tax accountant. Am I qualified but blocked by someone that's a strong incumbent above you? So like, my boss isn't going anywhere because he's a great tax accountant and he has a wine cellar he wants to fill, so he's not going to retire for a few more years. So that's sort of things you have to think about. Then there's also like, are you energized? Like, if you're not getting up in the morning going, geez, I really want to attack my work today. Like, sometimes there's tough days. Maybe you have a child that's sick or whatever. Like, I'm not talking about when things are normal and you're thinking about your job. If your job's not energizing, that's a good question. If you answer that says, no, it's not energizing me, that's probably a good sign you want to change. Are you still learning new things? Like my point about, it's really important about growing. So if you're not learning new things, that's a sign of risk or time to change. I think also we talked earlier about the skills and experience things. Like, do you have gaps and stuff that you need to get to be able to advance? Maybe it's time to take a lateral. You've been in the job for 3 years. You want the more senior role, but the person in the more senior role has a broader set of skill sets and experience. Well, then that's the time to move laterally. So maybe it's the same company. Companies are often a better place to do laterals because they get to know you, they trust you, and then they're willing to make that investment in you. And so even if you're frustrated in a role, don't necessarily quit your company. Think about, what could I do elsewhere in my company that could contribute to my growth and evolution. And then I think finally, the other thing is there a major change happening for my industry or sector or role or function that I need to be keeping in mind? Like, things may be automated, like, maybe someone needs to be involved in doing stuff with data in a fairly rudimentary way, but just because the company hadn't done stuff and all of a sudden AI comes in or something, like, then all of a sudden the role is totally completely changed. So it would be really important, if you're in a relatively lower level data role, is what can you do to advance your skills part-time so that maybe you could be the person that's driving the AI, right? So maybe do a part-time master's degree in that sort of thing, whatever it is, if that's what drives you, excites you. But the point would be is, how do you broaden and expand to make sure that if there's industry change or regulatory change, it doesn't impact you?
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. So I'm going to have just a couple more questions. And then if there are some questions from the audience, feel free to type it in as well. We'll take some questions. There are some questions coming in about the banking sector. So I just want to give you a heads up on that, Anthony. I'll see what questions we'll take. But there's one final slide here we want to talk about. Is around how to really maximize your relationships with mentors, coaches, and sponsors.
So this circle here is another thing I would recommend people screenshot, because this is part of that sort of being the CEO of your own career. This is a good way to process that, because obviously you can have a long-term objective, but then there's the day-to-day. How do you actually go about that? And this process circle is a good way to think about, not only just developing your career and what you want to pursue, but working through your objectives and stuff. But what's great about this is also a great way to work with a mentor or a sponsor on trying to achieve those things. Often mentors or sponsors they may have leadership skills, but they may not have training on how to be a mentor or a sponsor. And you get out of something what you invest in it. And so if you go into managing your mentoring relationship, your mentor or your sponsor, and you think about it as a process. So if you're first meeting with them and you have a career issue you're trying to develop, but hey, so I'm trying to figure something out to do, work through this cycle with them and be accountable. And then, so, hey, so the first meeting you talk about criteria, the second meeting you talk about alternatives, then you set objectives, and then you start working on it, you give them updates. And if you're having challenges, maybe the sponsor can get you an introduction to someone. That's what the sponsor's job is. The sponsor should be opening doors for you or making recommendations. A mentor may be more about, hey, well, have you tried this, or what do you think, that kind of stuff, but working with them to help you achieve your objectives. And then sometimes you're not going to achieve them. The world changes. And so if you don't, then use them again to start that cycle again. But if you're continually approaching your career in a constructive manner and guiding your relationship with your mentor and sponsor, you'll get a lot more out of the relationship. It's not just there for the mentor to pontificate about how lucky they've been in their career. That doesn't really get you anything. You hear some interesting stories and maybe some office gossip, but it's not going to actually help you advance in your career. And so the better way is to use this process to manage that relationship and be accountable and make it virtuous so that they want to meet with you again and again. Sometimes mentor relationships kind of die off because people don't have anything to talk about. It's just the mentor talking all the time and there's no advancement. If you go, hey, I have an agenda, like you should send an agenda to your mentor in advance of meeting with them. I want to talk about criteria tomorrow, whatever it is, so that they can mentally prepare and they understand there's actually an objective for the meeting, and then that meeting will be more valuable, and then they'll want to meet with you again. And they're like, hey, so I really enjoyed our meeting with the criteria. We talked about maybe some alternatives. These are I think are the 3 alternatives I'm looking at. What do you think? Which one do you think I should pursue? And so you're managing and owning that relationship and running that cycle, and it's more likely to make for a longer term relationship and a more productive relationship.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, to me, this all goes back to being intentional, right? With all this, is you have to put the time and effort to nurture the relationship and to plan in order to really maximize the relationship there. And one of the common things I often get when I talk to people is there is this challenge of the fear of networking or relationship building. And I think part of it is we need to practice and put ourselves out there more and really be able to identify like these different type of people in our lives and career who can also help us grow. Because I think Sharon had a question here, is like whether mentors can really have an influence in our careers.
Definitely, for sure. I mean, I know. I've mentored, it's at least a couple hundred people throughout my career because I've been doing it for over 20 years. But like a good example, I helped someone I mentored get an extra 100,000 in earnings. They were getting an executive role at a large financial institution, and they didn't know how to go about asking for more pay, but they felt that the pay wasn't going to be at the level they wanted, and they knew that once they entered, they'd have way less leverage. And so I coached her on how to approach that ask to be compensated in a manner that she felt fairly, and she got it. And so if you think about that, that's $100,000 a year perennially in her pay until she retires.
Yeah.
And it's very hard if you come in at the wrong level to get it. But so as her mentor, I helped her achieve that. Now, obviously, we don't all end up in those scenarios, but that's just, for me, a simple example of being, as a mentor, having that sober perspective and saying, hey, like, I know what you're worth, and this is how to engage and ask about what you think you're worth in a manner so you don't harm the relationship, but you do get what you're worth, so you're not thinking about what am I going to do in my next job.
Yeah. Learning from others there. Amazing. Yeah. So to wrap up here is really when we think about how to embrace the future and stay ahead of a change to future-proof your career. What knowledge, skills, and experience do people need to gain? I know that's a big, broad question, but what are some of maybe the things that people can start doing?
So, first of all, I think a key thing to future-proof yourself is you always have to have that growth or learning mindset. We've talked about that a couple of times, but like, if you're not continually, like behind me are all my degrees and accreditations. It's like if you're not continually, if you just think a university degree is going to get you there, it's not, right? Like, so then that's skills acquisition in certain ways, right? Education or, doing stuff like a CFA or whatever, that's acquisition of skills. But like, if you're not continually doing that, there's a huge risk that you're not going to be relevant. But that's also similarly to, from the point of view of that growth mindset needs to be with your work. Like, I think if you're only comfortable staying in your swim lane, you have to be prepared for the reality that swim lane could come to an end, right? So you need to be pushing yourself to think about, how do I broaden that swim lane, or do I switch swim lanes? Like, you don't necessarily have to take the risks I've taken with my career. My career is, if you're risk averse, you don't want my career. I get bored and I like learning new things, and I like to see how things fit together. Like, I really like to think systematically, and I learn something new, and then that sort of the block falls into my place. This, my three-dimensional understanding of the financial services industry globally. There's so much I don't know, but there's so much I've learned. It's made me realize how much I don't know. But it's also neat when I learn something, I read something, like, oh, that's neat how that fits together. I hadn't thought about that. Or, the unintended consequences of a new regulatory thing, where maybe a certain liquidity rule or something, like these things happen. And all of a sudden you see how it impacts different areas, so there's, like, I think it's having that mindset and the willingness to push yourself. So then what happens is, by doing that, there's more options open to you, because you can't necessarily predict if interest rates are going to go through the roof, or if there's going to be your firm's going to be sold and acquired and your job's going to be redundant, or a regulatory change. Like, you can't prepare necessarily for those things, but what you can prepare for with a growth mindset is growing and evolving yourself and pushing yourself and leveraging your strengths to try different things, so that through time you have a solid base that people can picture you in multiple roles. And so if the role you're currently in disappears, you have something else you can do.
Yeah, I agree. Right. I mean, goes back to planning and understand, like, what's really happening in the market, what the needs are, so that you can constantly grow and evolve. Like, if I look at, a lot of the people that I supported the last several years, there's definitely been a change in terms of even just moving into the more technical type of roles, or type of like data analytics, those type of roles that I'm seeing more of, that people want to move into as well. I think I want to get your thoughts. I remember seeing it, and you mentioned about the advice around the difference between developing your soft skills versus your technical skills.
Right.
What's your take on that from a career advancement standpoint?
So the soft skills are super important, and are sometimes the hardest to do. And that's one of the reasons why I've had an executive coach, even though I felt, even a dozen years ago, I felt I had good soft skills. There's no way that they were as good as they could be, and they can continue to improve, and they will always need work. And it's not as easy, because there isn't necessarily as a lot of training available. Now, a good MBA program like Ivy will help you evolve and grow your soft skills. But a key part of it is being willing to try and do new things and seek feedback, and not be defensive when you get the feedback. Try and internalize, okay, so why did I do that? How can I learn from that? Are there things I'm doing or have a tendency to do that would be a derailer, that would put an X on me, like people wouldn't want to work with me? Like, why did that not play out the way I thought it would play out? And get some perspectives and work on that stuff, because it's a bit of a, I think it's a kind of like filling in a mosaic. You maybe have the corners of the picture, but you don't really fully understand all the different things that are required. But if you continue to push it and get feedback, and think about how to be continually pushing yourself to advance and grow your soft skills, be it either as a leader or evaluating people, giving feedback, relationship management, how to take in feedback, all those things are soft skills that ultimately impact what people think of you. If you're defensive, they're not going to want to have you as an employee, because they can't give you direction. If you're me first and egotistical, no one's going to want to work with you, because it's like, well, why is this person? I don't want to be on that team with that person. If you're a bully, people aren't going to work for you, because life's short. Why work for a bully? Like, don't work for a bully. It's brutal. And it's not good, right? But sometimes it's a lot easier said than done. I mean, mortgages or things to do, you don't want to switch employers, that kind of stuff. But that's part of why you do your homework and you meet with people in your networking, so you can learn culture. Like, it's really important before you take a job to think about culture. Well, that's soft skills and thinking about well, what is the environment like? So if how do you define culture? What's the work-life balance? What happens if people are or do things that are inappropriate? Like what happens? What's the engagement from the point of view? Is work fun? Do people enjoy their time there? Is there a lot of turnover or not? Like those things can give you triangulation. If you're being interviewed for a role and you only meet the boss and you don't meet your peers, that may be a sign that you don't want to work there. Yeah. Right? So it's different things. But that takes soft skills. They think about, well, like why am I not meeting other people? Because they don't want me to know that no one else wants to work there. Right? Mm-hmm. Everyone's leaving or quitting or they're miserable. Right. So that's an example of a soft skill or thing to think about. But you need to continue pushing yourself and self-aware. If you ever meet someone with a comb over, they're likely not self-aware. Don't work for them. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I started losing my hair a long time ago. I shave my head regularly. So, doesn't mean I'm perfect, but at least I know I'm bald, right? Or going bald. I'm not fully bald yet, but I know that. And, but that's a good example of being self-aware. If you can't accept the fact you're going bald, I'm not sure I'd want to work for you.
Yeah. Amazing. Oh, this was such a great discussion. I want to hear from the audience. What's your biggest takeaway from today's session? What action will you take? If you can comment to let us know, that would be amazing. So Anthony, this was such a great discussion. You're starting your new role next week. What are you most excited about? What are the challenges and opportunities ahead for you there?
Well, thanks, Dana. And I really enjoyed this here. I'm really, really excited about the opportunity to serve the members of the Canadian Bankers Association and the staff. I see my role as serving them. And there's 55 really talented, dedicated people there that I'm now getting the honor of leading, which is mind-boggling. But I really think about that as an opportunity for service, working with them and helping them to help our members. And it's super exciting because, the CBA is 130 years old. Over 100 years ago, there was an act of parliament that formalized its organization and it's involved in the Bank Act. And so it's really plays a unique role in helping advance the Canadian economy. And they have the opportunity to work with these skilled professionals and to help our members grow and evolve the Canadian economy is super, super exciting. So I'm just thrilled to have the opportunity. I'm also super excited to be coming back to Canada, see a lot of old friends in person. I know the pandemic's been tough on us all. In some ways, the pandemic really helped me find a role because it was not hard to ask people for a Zoom chat or whatever. I'm not sure if I could have done the 100 conversations from Boston in the middle of the pandemic without a Zoom, the ability to do Zoom. So I'm thankful for that, but I'm also thankful to come back to Canada, which is a great country. It's nothing's perfect, but I'm having lived outside of Canada for the last 7.5 years, I'm really appreciative of how fantastic a place it is, and really honored to have this opportunity to come back and to reconnect with everyone and to serve the CBA and its members and its team.
Amazing. Well, I'm excited to have you back. And just want to share a couple comments here that the key learning, Sharon said, always continue learning and developing yourself, which in turn helps your skills matrix to grow. Go, Anthony. All right.
We have to give Sharon a commission.
And Sheetal here. Anthony, thanks so much for your wisdom. Everything you said made sense to me and my current situation. Congrats on your new role. And thanks, Diana, for organizing. Thank you for being here.
Well, thanks, Sheetal.
Sharon, can I say everything? Good luck on your first day next week.
Thanks, Sharon.
You got some great friends who know you here.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time, your presence, your wisdom. I know you have a busy few days ahead of you and you're moving back here. So thank you for making this time with me today. And I'm sure there are a lot of people who will be watching the replay as well. For those who are just catching, feel free to catch the replay on my YouTube channel. You will see the timestamps later on so that you can easily watch it and share it with others there. All right. Okay. So just to wrap up for those who are here, I will have another show next week on next Friday. On the 4th, I will actually be hosting with another LinkedIn Top Voice career confidence coach, Dr. Jasmine Askler, where we're going to be talking about own your voice and value with confidence. So this really ties into this topic of owning your career, but really from the standpoint of how to own your voice and value and worth there. So until next time, thank you so much for being here, and take care and stay safe.
Thanks, Diana. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.